Welcome to the information session for the Cumberland County Nonprofit Fiscal Recovery Program. Questions can also be emailed to arpsmb@cumberlandcountync.gov. In the email subject line, please write NFRAP question. An updated FAQ will be compiled and posted to the county's website under the American Rescue Plan tab following this session. Today's session is also being recorded and will also be posted under the American Rescue Plan tab. Today's session includes two sections, a presentation and a discussion that will involve a Q&A at the conclusion of the presentation. Today's focus will be on the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, CSLFRF, overview. We will discuss the purpose of funds, the county's approach, the application sections, eligible categories, application review criteria, and application attachments. On March 11, 2021, President Biden signed into law the stimulus bill entitled the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. This act appropriated $1.9 trillion to be used to speed up the recovery from the economic impacts and health effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing recession. First proposed on January 14, 2021, this package builds upon many of the measures in the CARES Act of 2020, signed by then President Trump, and in the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. Of that $1.9 trillion, $362 billion was appropriated for coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds, of which $65.2 million was appropriated to Cumberland County. The Cumberland County Board of Commissioners has allocated $3.5 million of this appropriation to be used for COVID-19 assistance to nonprofits, which we are discussing today. So what is the purpose of this program? The purpose of these funds are to be allocated specifically to 501c3 and 501c19 nonprofit organizations in Cumberland County that have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and to aid in a strong and equitable recovery. The purpose of this program is truly to provide economic assistance that will assist and supplement organizations in their ongoing recovery from the pandemic. Equity refers to our approach in targeting aid to those who need it most by casting a wide net. Cumberland County is committed to investing these funds into nonprofit organizations. And this is the approach: to identify and directly address a need or negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on local nonprofits, to support equitable outcomes for the most impacted populations, having a lasting impact, to ensure that funds are being used for an eligible use and meet a public purpose and are within county authority to fund per North Carolina General Statute, and to comply with all provisions of the funding contract. Now we will discuss the sections of the application. The application has multiple sections including an overview, application submission requirements, organization information, organization description, economic impact, proposed use of funds, applications to other forms of assistance or funding sources, job hiring and retention information, conflicts of interest, acknowledgement of required assurances, and a signature certification. In the overview section, it talks about the purpose of the Nonprofit Fiscal Recovery Assistance Program is to provide short-term financial assistance to nonprofit organizations that suffered an economic hardship due to the COVID-19 pandemic. All applicants must be determined eligible in order to be awarded funding through this program. The organization must be operating within Cumberland County, and certain organizations may be ineligible to apply. It is important to complete all sections of the application to prevent any delays in the application process. Any questions, again, can be referred to our ARP team at arpsmb@cumberlandcountync.gov. This section also includes a link to the program policy that governs this program. There are several attachments that must be included in order to process your application. Cumberland County reserves the right to request additional information as needed to complete the application process for eligibility and award for funding. Other information requests may include, but are not limited to, employee income verification, bank statements, sources of other assistance received, job creation and retention reports, and other documents necessary to complete the process for eligibility and award for funding. These documents include articles of incorporation for the nonprofit, tax-exempt status information, Form 990 for calendar years 2021 and 2020, current payroll register, current property lease agreement or mortgage document, and current W-9 with the organization's legal name. In the organization information section, we request that you include your organization's legal name and your assumed name that is registered with the NC Secretary of State, if applicable. Please also include your organization's mailing address, telephone number, and email. If your operating address is different from your mailing address, please include this address as well. It is important that you include this information for us to determine whether your business is within the limits of Cumberland County. Please include your incorporation date, your federal EIN, and your nonprofit status, whether you are a 501c3 or a 501c19. There's a yes or no question of whether your business is currently in bankruptcy and if you are currently being assessed for criminal or civil fines or penalties. Please also check what type of tenancy arrangement you are in, whether you are a building owner with a mortgage, or you own the building, or you are a tenant who has a lease and pays rent. Please also include what type of insurance your organization currently has. In the organization description section, we ask that you indicate the nature of your organization and the types of services you provide. This is a brief narrative section where you can include this information specific to your organization. It has a 3,000 character limit. There are 3 parts to the economic impact section. In part 1, it asks, please describe the degree to which your organization has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, list specific examples, and whether your organization had to close. Please describe the degree to which your organization has been able to maintain employees during the COVID-19 pandemic and whether the award will help your organization do so. And please describe how your organization has equitably provided services and inclusively engaged with the Cumberland County community. In the proposed use of funds section, we ask that you define the use of funds based on the below categories. So this policy allows for two categories to expend funds: payroll, which includes wages and associated taxes; occupancy, which includes rent or mortgage payments, as well as utilities. You are able to request up to a maximum amount of $50,000. Please be sure that whatever figures you claim can be tied back to an applicable document, i.e., a mortgage statement or a lease agreement. We have also included a question that asks, have you received prior federal, state, or local aid related to COVID-19? This question is included not as a disqualifier question, but to mainly determine if a duplication of benefits will be caused by the awarding of these funds. According to program requirements, and as a condition of the award, your organization will be required to make available jobs for persons whose household incomes are at or below the income limits established here. For a single person, the annual income must be at or below $37,350. This would constitute a low to moderate income position. In this section, you will include how many positions you currently have in your organization that are low to moderate income and how many you plan to create that are low to moderate income. In the conflicts of interest and acknowledgement of required assurances sections, it is important to familiarize yourself with these sections to make sure that you understand the terms that are outlined here. Before you execute the contract, please read them carefully, and if you have any questions with the terms here, please email us at arpsmb@cumberlandcountync.gov. The final section of the application is the certification page. On this page, you or your authorized representative will sign your application. Please ensure that all information in the application is applicable and accurate information. Once you sign this document, we will process the document as if all information is factual information. There are two allowable categories eligible for funding for this program: payroll and occupancy. Occupancy is broken down as mortgage, rent, or utilities. It is important to point out that mortgage, rent, and utilities refers to the operating address of the organization and not personal use or personal single-family homes or multifamily home dwellings. Any purpose other than reimbursement of payroll and occupancy expenses are not eligible under this program. These are the questions that will be asked during the review process. Does the organization employ LMI or low to moderate income, FTE or full-time equivalent positions paying less than $37,350? Does the organization have a valid EIN number? Is the organization registered and in good standing with the NC Secretary of State? Does the organization carry sufficient general liability insurance? And has the organization been in operation on or before March 3rd, 2021? So that concludes the presentation part of tonight's information session. One thing I'd like to point out as well, as you type your questions into the chat box, on the page that asks for your business's information. That includes your business's name, assumed name, phone number, and email. It's also important for me to point out when you are putting your phone number into the application, please pay attention to the format that you're using. With this format, it will only allow you to use the standard number format. So that means that you would use parentheses, your area code, the number, a hyphen, and then the rest of the number. The application will only take it in that format. Also, for EIN, it's important to use the correct EIN format. And so there will be two numbers, a hyphen, and the remainder of the EIN number. And so if it's not in that format, the application will not take it. So I want to make sure we repeated that and made sure that you were aware of those two items in the application. But please feel free to type any questions you may have into the questions box, and we will do our best to answer those questions. Again, as you ask your questions, we will do our best to answer the question, but if we do not have an answer at this time, we will not give you an incorrect answer. We will include answer to that question in the FAQ that will be added to the county's website.
First question is, when entering funds, what time period are you looking at? For instance, is this effectively a reimbursement for costs during the shutdown, or are you basing it off of current costs today?
That's a very good question. And so what we're going to be looking at is current costs. And so in the provision of the American Rescue Plan, we are only able under that provision to look at businesses or organizations that were created or existed before March 3rd, 2021. However, we cannot cover costs incurred from March 21 to present. We are only able to cover costs as of the execution of a contract agreement. And so basically, if you are eligible for the program and you are approved for funding by the Board of County Commissioners, once that contract is executed, we will allow you to use the funds to reimburse ongoing expenses.
The next question is, for the registered and in good standing with the NC Secretary of State, is that the charitable solicitation license?
So we would go to, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to the North Carolina Secretary of State, and we will go to your vendor page there, and we're looking to see is your business in good standing. So if you are an active, make sure that you're not delinquent or dissolved on your filing. And so typically with nonprofits, there's an original filing and there's not an annual filing the way you would have a standard business, but we're looking to make sure you're filed and in good standing in the state of North Carolina. Of course, there are other things that you must do as a nonprofit ongoing annually to be in good standing, but that's just the first step that we take to make sure that you are in good standing with the North Carolina Secretary of State. Of course, we know that you have to file 990s depending on what your revenues were, income was for that year. But as far as the NC Secretary of State, we're looking to make sure that you are properly registered and in good standing in the state of North Carolina.
What is the time frame for the reimbursement? How far back can it go?
So the reimbursement is going to be assessed at the execution of a contract. So to give you an example, if your application was submitted, let's say tomorrow, and there was an agreement that was executed sometime in January or February, as of that execution date, let's say it's February 1st, you can begin to claim expenses. So the way this would look basically is you would submit documents for the month of February that you can show that you expended the dollars for whatever reason you applied for the program. So that may be payroll or occupancy. And so you would submit that payroll information or submit that occupancy information, that paid lease or that paid mortgage, or the ACH for a payroll, and then we would basically reimburse you for that expense that you incurred for that month.
If an organization is the recipient of an ERC tax credit, are they still eligible?
So as far as as far as credits are concerned, I don't have a specific answer for that, but this is why there's a question in the application that asks about duplication of, about prior federal, state, and local aid. And so we do want you to include, you would check yes, and you would include whatever type of aid you received. And during the process, we would just look at that to make sure that whatever we're doing on our side is not going to cause a duplication. But look at it like this. Going back to my example from a couple of moments ago, as long as you are requesting funds in the current month, let's say it's February again, and we are reimbursing for that expense, as long as you have not duplicated that reimbursement with another funding source, you have not caused a duplication of benefits.
What documentation requirement is needed for payroll, like job description, payroll records, or payroll documentation supporting the request for payroll?
So typically for payroll, we're going to use that as a backup when we process the request. And so what we're looking for typically is standard documents that you would use. We don't want you to create something that you don't typically do, but we want it to make sense for your business. So for example, if you have payroll software and your payroll software generates a payroll summary detail page, you can include that. If you have your employees do timesheets, you can include that. What we're looking for mainly is to show that you have an individual. The individual was paid, is a low to moderate income individual. And my math, I don't want to get my math wrong, but $37,350 is somewhere around, I think it's a little more than $18 an hour. And so that individual is being paid an hourly wage of that or below. And then you're showing that you have also paid out the applicable salaries, the salary tax for that as well. So you're showing that payroll register, and then you would also include like an ACH payment or a check, a cleared check to show that the funds were actually expended. So there's two parts to that. You're showing the record that you have that you use for internal purposes, and then also using the actual ACH or check, cleared check to show that you actually paid out the funds.
Can you repeat the phone number and EIN acceptance format?
Sure. So with the phone number in the application, make sure that you're putting in the parentheses, so it won't take it otherwise. And so parentheses, if it's a favorable number, 910, close parentheses, 3 numbers, dash, 4 numbers is the format. And then for the EIN, make sure that you're including the first 2 numbers, the dash, and then the subsequent numbers behind that. And that's the way. It will throw up an error for you. It'll turn red and let you know it's incorrect. But to get it right the first time and not accidentally, go to the next page, please make sure you put it in those formats.
Does this include a project that has been started but not completed yet?
Project. So this program is not. So this is a little bit different. Well, a lot different from a project-based program. So this program is more about the direct assistance to the nonprofit, and not necessarily what the nonprofit does. And so, of course, nonprofits in the community are, great in the community, do a lot of good things in the community. But this program is tailored to focus on helping the nonprofit organization in and of itself recover. And so we're not focusing on what the nonprofit does. We're focusing on the needs of the nonprofit. And so nonprofits have to exist somewhere, and so they need payroll. They need occupancy like rent, mortgage, utilities, and they also, many of them employ individuals, and they need dollars for staff. Staff salaries. And so that's the focus on this and not necessarily the program piece of it.
What about a person who worked as a volunteer but now needs to be included in personnel?
So you could add that in. So if you recall during the presentation on the job hiring and retention section of the application, there's two boxes there. And so one box talks about the hiring of employees, creation of positions, not employees, creation of positions, and then the retention of positions. And so if you have a person who's volunteering who is shifting over and becoming an employee, then that would just count as a creation of a position, and they could be counted there.
Going back to payroll, would that also include, for payroll, could you include pay and benefits? Like salary, 45,000 plus 5,000, insurance, and 401k match equals 50,000.
Yes, and so payroll is like an all-inclusive term, and so when we say payroll, we're referring to the applicable, benefits, fringes, and salary taxes that may go along with that. And so if it's something that your business already pays out, then that's fine. Of course, if you don't normally pay out, $6,000 bonuses, weekly, we can't, we wouldn't start doing that. But if there's things that you already pay for, like 401k matches or contributions or something of that nature, that typical, or health insurance, that's part of the fringe benefit that could be included in salary and payroll.
If an employee received a pay raise but met the income requirements for the requested months included within the application, is this still acceptable?
So remember, once the so we start looking at we would look at the employee after the execution of the contract. And so if you're referring to an employee who, again, if like a contract was executed in the month of January or February, if that employee meets the requirements in those months, then you're welcome to include them in those months. But if at any time that employee exceeds the income limits, then they would no longer be able to participate. So that employee currently, like as of today, exceeds the limit, they would not be eligible to receive. They would not be eligible to be counted in the number when applying for the reimbursement.
Just so I'm clear, the only eligible payroll costs are those paid to employees below the LMI threshold.
That's correct. And so a North Carolina requirement and a Treasury requirement is that these ARPA dollars go to for a public purpose. And that's a defined term of what a public purpose is. One of the defined definitions of a public purpose is the employment of low to moderate income individuals. And so I'll say it like this. It's reimbursement based. And so what you have done on the front end is you've already spent the dollars, expended the funds. And then you're claiming that expense, and then you're reclaiming that supplement from the county. Once that takes place, our obligation to those dollars ends there. Of course, you need to maintain your records, but if you pay an employee and you show evidence of that employee being paid, and then you issue for a reimbursement, receive the reimbursement, and you use that reimbursement for something else other than payroll occupancy, that's fine because you've already met the requirements for the reimbursement.
Are the benefits, like health insurance, paid to those employees eligible?
Yes.
Does this include salaries going forward, or is this all retroactive?
This is salaries going forward, and so it's not allowable under North Carolina statute for us to go backwards. We're not allowed to give what are called counties are not allowed to. Local governments are not able to give grants. but we can offer financial awards, and we're doing it on a reimbursement basis, and we're doing it as um, a going on the basis of moving forward. Can't think of my words, but we're doing it going forward from execution of the contract moving forward.
Is internet connectivity included as a utility expense?
So occupancy, that's a good question actually. Occupancy will refer to things that are required for you to exist within a building. And so those things are like you. Of course, you have to pay the mortgage or pay the rent to be able to stay in the building. In order to have staff or anybody in the building, you have to have running water and have power. Those are types of things that have to be that have to exist in the building in order to be in the building. You don't have to have internet to be in the building, and so that would not meet the definition of a utility or for occupancy purposes.
Will utility costs be able to be included for the reimbursement from March 3rd, 2021 to now, not to exceed $50,000?
So going back to my previous statement, so we would not go back retroactively. We would count costs for the organization moving forward from the execution of a agreement with the county. And so whatever date that contract is signed and executed by the organization representative and the county, that's when we will start looking at the cost that you have expended.
For those whose mortgage is paid off, can we seek assistance for crucial building repairs we have to pay in lieu of mortgage/rent?
So this is kind of a mix between two answers I gave. And so the short answer to that would be that would not be eligible. But what I would say is if you do not pay for your mortgage, I would look at utilities, and I would also look at, because you still have utilities, I'm sure, if you're in a location, and I would look at the payroll. And I would go back to my previous point and say that once you have expended the dollars for the purpose that you were awarded them, payroll, occupancy, once they are reimbursed to you, we don't have any more need to know the use of the funds, because we've already shown, you've proven that you have received a reimbursement for an allowable expense. Once you receive those dollars back, they are yours. And so if you go use those funds for another reason to help your organization, that's fine. But as far as the application is concerned, that would not be something that would be able to be funded through the application.
If your funds are exclusively for the utility, do you still have to submit payroll documents?
That's a very good question. Yes, because that's okay. Very, very, very good question. So you may request one or the other or both. And so to your question, if you submitted occupancy documents, and all you want us to get, all you want is to have your utilities paid, you're still going to submit the payroll information. Why? The why is because the reason we are able to reimburse your organization is because you perform a public purpose, and that public purpose under the policy for this program is the hiring and retention of low to moderate income individuals. And so we have to always maintain that you are employing low to moderate income individuals in order to justify under the public purpose for you to be reimbursed.
So we submit an application, get approved, keep track of our occupancy expenses, and get reimbursed at the end of the year, or month by month basis?
So we're able to do We can do it as least frequently as you would like. The most frequently we can reimburse you is on a monthly basis. And so I understand that individuals may run payroll weekly, biweekly. Some people do it monthly. So you could submit documents once a month, and we will process that. Or you may choose to do it less frequently, maybe bi-monthly or quarterly, or you maintain the document so you do it one time, at the end of the year. That's your choice, and we're fine with that either way. But the maximum that we can process is once a month.
Does the position have to be full-time or part-time to keep within the low to moderate income?
So we're referring to LMI, or low to moderate income FTEs, or full-time equivalents. And so a full-time equivalent is going to be a 40-hour employee. And so if I am an individual who works 40 hours a week, I am by myself, in and of myself, a full-time equivalent. But if I work, let's say I have two employees who each work 20 hours a week. They're both part-time. 20 hours and 20 hours equals 40. Those two employees working 40 hours would equal one FTE, one full-time equivalent.
If we are required to make upgrades to meet disability requirements for occupancy, is that covered?
So occupancy, for the terms of this program, what we're going to look at is what is outlined in your lease agreement, or I would assume that you're referring to your lease agreement. And so we're going to look at what is in that lease as the base document. That's what we're going to focus on. And so we're going to look at your lease and say, okay, this annual lease equals, let's say it's $15,000, and so we're looking at your application to see, did you ask for lease assistance at or below $15,000, and so that basically is the what we would do. If there's an outside entity outside that lease requiring you to do some type of modification to get up to code, or something like that. Thank you, Danny. To get up to code, that will be something separate outside of your lease. And so I think the quick answer I want to say is I do not believe that will be eligible. But again, I will definitely look at that question again, and I will include a more complete answer when I post the FAQ, and that should be posted by close of business on Friday.
Is there a required percentage of overall total employees who must meet the low to moderate income requirements in order to apply?
No. And so everything just needs to be what we would call proportional. And so, of course, if you are asking, for example, to let's say the only thing that you're requesting on your application is to retain one LMI employee. Well, we just determined that an LMI employee is $37,350 or less. And so if you requested, for example, $50,000, that exceeds what will be allowable for that low to moderate income employee. And so we may not disqualify your application because you asked for more, but we would look at it and maybe make an adjustment or make a secondary recommendation for the application because it exceeds what would be proportional for your application. And I'll use that as well. Going back to the previous example, if you submit, if all you're wanting to do is to receive reimbursement for, let's say, a lease, and your lease is $15,000, but you requested $50,000, Well, that doesn't add up. And so we would look at that and maybe recommend a different amount based on the proportionality of what you've submitted as documentation to support your request, and as opposed to what is proportional and what the county can actually award you.
Do funds have to be expended by the receiving organization by a certain date?
So you're not expending funds, you're being reimbursed funds. And so the dollars that you're spending are your own. And so what you're doing is you are expending dollars for payroll or occupancy. And then you are then providing that documentation to the county to show that you spent those dollars, and then you're receiving a reimbursement. So those are your dollars that you're spending, and there's no time frame on you spending the county's dollars because you receive that as a reimbursement. And again, once you receive your reimbursement, we're not concerned about what you use the funds for because we've already determined that you've used your funds for an eligible reason.
This is adding on, but if I get 50,000 and it's going to take me a full year to recoup that award, is that okay?
Yes, that's okay. So I think that's a bigger point that I think I failed to expound on. So the way that this award will be distributed for those who are awarded funding, what will happen is I'll use $50,000 for example. If a organization was awarded the full amount of the award, $50,000, what we will do is there are terms in the policy that require that you maintain employment for at least a year. And so the way we do that is we don't do a grant and give you all the dollars up front. We do it over the course of the year. And so what you would do is you would take $50,000, for example, you would divide that by 12, and if my math is correct, that's $4,166.66. So that would be the total amount that you could draw down or get reimbursement for each month. Further, you would further break down that monthly allotment by the number of LMI employees. And so if you're going to maintain 2 employees is what you were approved to maintain, and then you got the full award, and let's say that you only employed 1 and you haven't made it to 2 yet because you're still trying to recruit and hire somebody. We know how hard it is to recruit and hire people right now. You'd be able to draw down half of the monthly allocation for that month. Once you have all the employees that you said that you would hire or maintain, then you'd be able to draw down the full reimbursement for each month. But just because you did not receive your full reimbursement in the first month or 2 because you didn't have the proper staffing levels, you don't lose that allocation. We would just tack it on to the end of it. And so we'll give you every opportunity in order to draw down all your funds.
Can we claim out-of-pocket funds spent on clients?
So the only expenses that you can claim for this program are payroll and occupancy. And payroll is the applicable wages, fringes, payroll taxes, and then occupancy is mortgage, rent, and utilities. Those are the only costs allowed under this program. But again, once you have expended those funds and you have received reimbursement, again, those funds are your fund to use as you see fit. So that's the last question we have on the board. I'll give you all a couple of moments to type any additional questions. But as a wrap up, I just want to, as we're wrapping up, I just want to mention that the application is going to be live directly following this information session on the county's website. Again, we can be contacted directly at our email, arpsmb@cumberlandcountync.gov. We would much rather that you email us so that we can track so somebody can respond. That email goes to multiple people, and so it's important to send an email there to make sure that you get a response from somebody, and your question or comment isn't lost with an individual.
Can payroll and utilities both be claimed each month?
Yes, you can claim both payroll and utilities each month. And so any combination, one by itself, you could claim occupancy by itself, you could claim payroll by itself, you can claim both together. That is fine. As long as it's a combination of the two or one or the other.
Will the questions, responses asked in the webinar be typed and posted? Some of the questions were difficult to hear. My apologies if already answered.
Not a problem. So there will be an FAQ, a frequently asked questions page, typed up. So that's why we asked to use this questions function. We're able to save your questions asked today, and we will compile a list and more non off the cuff, more thoughtful answers to your questions, so you can go back and review those. Also, I'll point out that as time goes on, I know that sometimes, we think we've answered every question, but questions seem to arise as time goes on. And so if we start to receive a question regularly and it becomes a frequent question, then we will also include that question in the FAQ, because we just assume that a lot of people have the same question.
What source are you using for the low to moderate income levels? Also, if the person is working in a family of 5, these adjustments would coincide with the number of family members, correct?
Let me take that. Read that first part again.
Will the question? Oh, sorry. Where did I go? What source are you using for the low to moderate income level?
Okay, so for that question, we are using the most current HUD income guidelines. So the HUD guidelines for 2022.
And also, if the person is working in a family of 5, these adjustments would coincide with the number of family members, correct?
So for the purposes of this program is geared towards organization and not the employee. And so we are not requesting, we are not obligating employees to return information, because they're not applying for this program. The organization is. And so we're going to base our numbers on the individual employee, because we don't have documents to show us that this employee is a head of household or a spouse or has a family of 5. And so we're mainly going to focus on that one employee, $37,350, because we don't have the documents to show from the employee what their household composition is. We're going by what documents the organization has per employee.
Will the slides be available after this session?
Yes, and so on our website, under the same tab that the application and policy will be posted, you will see this presentation, the live presentation, as well as a second tab that just has the slides for the presentation.
Can we include property taxes and insurance premiums?
I'm assuming you're referring to insurance related to the property. And so what we're going to be looking for is what costs are outlined in the mortgage statement. And so that's a monthly cost that's paid with the mortgage, and it's included in that consolidated statement. Then we can look at that. Same thing with occupancy. If something's included under your occupancy agreement, because sometimes you may have an occupancy agreement, a lease agreement where the rent is by itself, and then you have some lease agreements where the rent and utilities are combined, and so that may take different forms. And so that is a consolidated document there combined, then I would say yes. But again, I'll look into that a little bit more, and I'll include that in the FAQ.
When can we expect approval after submission?
And so our plan is, well, not our plan, we will be doing rolling applications. And so we will be looking at applications as they come in. And so again, it's very important when you send in your application to make sure you send in a complete application. Because if everything is as it should be when received, we can process it pretty timely, fairly timely. Um, but if something's missing, then we will have to send out requests to you for specific for I can't get my words out, specific documents. And so that can also prolong the process. And so if you're able to get your documents in timely, then we will process those. But to your question, I kind of want to give you a brief overview of how a application is processed to the award process. And so your application, once submitted, will be reviewed by the ARP team. If your application is all together and everything is as it should be, we will process that and move it to what we have, which is the ARP staff committee, which you will see in the policy is the committee that's been established in order to make recommendations to move to the ARP committee, which is made up of which is a subcommittee of the Board of County Commissioners. And that committee is made up of Commissioner Jimmy Keefe, who is the chairman of that committee, Commissioners Glenn Adams and Tony Stewart. If they recommend or approve the recommendations of the staff committee, those recommendations will then be moved to a full board, the full board of 7 members, to a board meeting for a formal approval. Once that takes place, you will receive what is called a conditional award letter, letting you know that you have been approved for funding, and then we will commence the contracting phase, which can take anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks, again, pending all information is received as requested. And so it's very important to know that outside of the ARP program, county legal and county finance is also involved in this process, and they may request documents as well that they need in order to provide legal sufficiency and also to pre-audit the contract document.
Will there still be a monthly cap on payroll and utilities of an average of $4,000?
Yes, because so whatever funding amount you are awarded, you can take that number and divide it by the 12 months of the year, and those are 12 equal payments. And so it's $50,000, it's $4,100. If it's $12,000, it's $1,000 a month. And so that is based off of the 12 equal payments.
I own the building outright. How does that affect what I can apply for?
So you could still claim utilities for the building, and you could still claim payroll expense if you have payroll expense. So it is now 7:30. And so I appreciate you giving me an hour of your time. I know it's very late in the evening, but we wanted to allow you some time to not rush home. We know that you are all working people, and we wanted you to have an opportunity to be able to be settled and take part in this webinar. Again, we will include these questions and other questions that may arise frequently on our website under the frequently asked questions page. We are available for questions. Again, like I said, once you email us at the arpsmb@cumberlandcountync.gov, multiple individuals will receive that email, and you will receive a response, a timely response. but please allow us some time to respond to as well, because we want to make sure that we're giving you a complete and thoughtful answer to your question. At this time, the application is live on our website. And so again, you can go to cumberlandcountync.gov. And if you go to the ARP American Rescue Plan tab under the County Commissioners, you will see a thumbnail for nonprofit assistance. On that page, you will see our policy as well as the application. And very shortly, you will also see this presentation and the slides to this presentation. I hope that this has been beneficial to you. I hope it's helped some of your questions. But as questions arise, I know they will, we are here to support you through the process. We hope that this program is very meaningful to you, and that we're able to have meaningful impact in your organization. Thank you so much, and you all have a great night.